Welcome to Empowering Seniors, the web series. I'm Katherine Ambrose, your host, and I'm joined today by Dr. Tim Watt. We're going to continue our discussion on COVID. Today, we're going to talk about supplements and flattening the curve. Welcome, Dr. Watt. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. It's nice to be back.
So we can't wait to have you back in Kansas so we can get you back on the Channel 8 television show. In the meantime, it's awesome of you to share your time with us and share a little information. And I'm very interested in knowing more about what you have to say on supplements, and also to hear what you wanted to share with us on flattening the curve. So I'll just let you begin. Maybe introduce yourself a little bit again for those that are just joining.
Well, I am a neurosurgeon. I still practice neurosurgery, but I'm also an anti-aging physician. I work with Synergenics, which is the largest age management practice in the world, out of their Denver office. And age management basically is preventive medicine. We're talking there about making you as healthy as possible and keeping you as healthy as possible. And with the COVID epidemic out there, what's becoming painfully obvious is that what I've been telling everybody for years, which is you've got to be proactive about your health, is more important now than ever. Because the people that are obese, the people that are hypertensive, the people that have diabetes, the people that have all of these health problems that I keep trying to address, or rather to get you, the patient, to address, are what's making people the most susceptible to not just getting the virus, but becoming deathly ill and having serious complications with the virus. So it's kind of become a now more than ever time to say we need to get our health in hand. Let me go from there to the opposite of the way you brought things up.
Okay.
The news is busy every day talking about flattening the curve, flattening the curve. And as we began talking about coming out of hiding, sort of getting back to a normal lifestyle and a normal economy, of course, the debate you're hearing is the terrified people on one side saying it's too soon, we have to stay locked down, versus the people on the other hand who there's nothing left in their checkbook. They're saying it's past time to get back to work. And everybody wants to know, well, where's the truth in between? Mm-hmm. What a lot of people are missing is the point of flattening the curve is not to decrease the number of people that get ill. The sharp peak versus the flattened out curve have the same area under the curve. In other words, we're talking about the same number of people getting the virus. The concern, especially early on, and especially in hot spots like New York City, was if you have a bunch of people showing up very ill at one time, and it doesn't have to be tens of thousands. If 25 people showed up to the Via Christi emergency room in Wichita really, really sick at one time, that's going to bog their ER down. They're just not built to handle that. No hospital in the country is built to handle that. So as the public health officials were so concerned that we'd have high numbers of people very sick, we obviously went into this mitigation mode of let's try to have people trickle into the hospital as opposed to it being an avalanche of people showing up. Mm-hmm. But again, what we're doing is slowing the rate at which people are showing up very ill. We're not decreasing the number at all, not one iota. And what a lot of people seem to forget is they think, okay, if we just stay in lockdown long enough, this is going to magically go away. No, that's not the way it works. Now, most viruses are very sensitive to ultraviolet light. And so as summer comes around, maybe summery weather will help us be a whole nother factor in mitigation. But the bottom line is still, we're not really going to deal with this until enough people have been exposed and developed their own immunity. that the virus is not able to jump from person to person to person because it keeps hitting the roadblock of somebody that's already had it and is immune. So it really, whether we come out of lockdown today, tomorrow, next week, next month, there's still going to be virus out there. You're still going to be exposed. And the question, quite honestly, is not, are you going to be exposed? It's just a question of when are you exposed. So if we accept that as a baseline premise, that barring a vaccine, and an effective, safe vaccine, if we're really lucky, is 1.5 years away, not a couple of months. And that's if we're lucky. Barring that vaccine and massive vaccinations, which still doesn't come with a guarantee that it protects everybody, you have to count on the fact that at some point you're going to be exposed to this. And rather than be terrified and say, well, then it's just a matter of time before I die from the virus, we need to step back and remember that a very small percentage of people that get COVID-19 actually end up dying. Now, that's not to belittle it, all right? It's terrible when somebody dies, especially when it's somebody you know or somebody you love. But the death rates are not 40% or 50%. This is not Ebola. The death rate is looking like it's maybe 0.5%. And it may turn out to be less as we get antibody testing and see that maybe we have a lot of people that already have this and they're just not being counted. But nevertheless, what we are finding across the country is the people that get the virus and become really sick are admitted to the hospital, maybe have to go to the ICU, maybe end up on the ventilator, maybe don't make it out of the hospital. Almost all of these people have other pre-existing health issues. So again, if you are set up to get ill because of your baseline poor health, that's a problem. And since it doesn't matter how long you hide under your bed, you're eventually going to be exposed. It behooves you to spend that time in hiding, and for that matter, every other day for the rest of your life, concentrating on being healthy, so that when you are exposed, maybe you're the person that barely notices it, or maybe you're the person that gets mild symptoms. Now, this is when I have to give the disclaimer. Katherine and I are not offering to be your physician and offer medical advice right now. If you want me to be your doctor, you have to track me down and pay me to be your doctor. But we can talk in some generalities about things that we know are healthy and we know are helpful and are ways to hedge your bet. The last time we talked on the internet like this, I mentioned that obesity was the #1 cause, and we talked about you have to get your weight down. Quit thinking about it, quit talking about it, quit eating the crap, get your weight down. The next biggest risk factors, interestingly, don't appear to be primary lung problems, although that's not helpful for you, but it's cardiovascular and more systemic problems. Diabetes, hypertension are the next 2 on the list, and guess what? Those go hand in hand with the obesity, all right? So what are some things that we can do just in terms of general health? Well, obviously, getting the crap out of your diet, no sugar, no vegetable oil is #1. But let's get back to vitamins and supplements. A lot of people say, well, if you're just eating healthy, you get all the vitamins you need. No, you just can't, no matter how clean you eat. Today, the way foods are grown and shipped and processed and microwaved, it's almost impossible to get everything you need from your food. And the single most important vitamin when you're talking about viruses, you don't get from your food anyway. That's vitamin D. We know, absolute fact, that vitamin D protects you from viral infections. Cold and flu season is in the winter, because when it's cold and it's cloudy and you get a little amount of sunlight and you're all bundled up and you're inside, that's when your vitamin D level plummets because you make vitamin D from sun exposure. And again, even during the summertime, your dermatologist is chasing you around with a big floppy hat and SPF 50. So most people aren't getting the sun exposure they need anyway. But we know that autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis are related to low vitamin D levels. We know that getting the flu and getting the cold, which are viruses, are made more susceptible by low vitamin D level. So, can we say with certainty that having an adequate amount of vitamin D is going to protect you from COVID-19? Of course not. It's too soon. Nobody has any data. When you're confused because every day the news has a conflicting report, it's almost impossible to do real science on human beings. There's too many variables. It's very hard to control just one thing. And even though this seems like it's gone on forever, it hasn't. It's been a short period of time. So we're not going to say anything today that this is the absolute guaranteed proof that this is going to work. But we know that vitamin D in adequate amounts makes you less likely to get viruses across the board. COVID-19's a virus. So to me, it seems pretty self-evident that if having an adequate vitamin D level protects you from most viruses and you're scared of a virus, it makes sense to get your vitamin D level up where it belongs. And nobody's getting that from sunshine unless they are in the tropics or a subtropical area, out in the bright sunlight over most of their body surface every single day. So you need to take a vitamin D supplement. And the real kicker is you need to get your vitamin D level tested. The test is called 25-hydroxy vitamin D, but you don't have to memorize that. Just tell your doctor, test my vitamin D level. And you want that number to come back around 85 to 95. Now, most doctors think that a level of 30 is just fine. And every lab you go to has a different, what's called reference range of what's the acceptable high and low. Mm-hmm. And some labs actually say the level of 90 is too high. Most labs say 100 is too high. But this is all based off of sort of a bell curve distribution. And it's important to understand that when we talk about the RDAs, the recommended daily allowance for vitamins, these unfortunately diseases. When you have virtually no vitamin D at all, you're susceptible to a disease called Rickets, which cripples the bones in little children. Mm. And it's a terrible disease, and by taking a moderate to small amount of vitamin D, you prevent rickets, which is great. We've essentially stamped rickets out. I've only seen one case in over 30 years of practice. But the amount you need to not get rickets has nothing to do with the amount you need to be healthy. Vitamin D is an immune modulator. Low vitamin D makes you susceptible to autoimmune diseases. It looks like it makes you susceptible to cancer. It makes you susceptible to infections of all kinds. And when we look at young, healthy people that are exposed to very bright subtropical sunlight to their whole body, like nothing but swimsuits on, mm-hmm. for a period of a few months, their vitamin D levels naturally come back at around 90. So if young, healthy people exposed naturally make low vitamin D levels predispose you to being sick, then I'm going to suggest to you that having a vitamin D level of 30 is not a good idea. Okay. In terms of what do I do different now than before the COVID outbreak, not very much. I've spent the last 18 years trying to live a healthy lifestyle. But what I have done is I increased my vitamin D intake a little bit from what I was already taking to get that level pushed up to where it's at the high end of normal. So vitamin D is number one on the checklist. And it's fine to just go out and say, I'm going to get some 5,000 international unit vitamin D capsules and start taking them. But it behooves you to have your level checked. And even if you're taking it, you still want to have your level checked. I've got two friends down in Wichita that I got them on vitamin D several months ago. the COVID outbreak came out, I said, you need to go get your vitamin D levels checked. One of them had a level of 32, the other one had a level of 54. So I said, guess what? The amount you're taking isn't enough. You need to double it up and get those levels up. Okay. So number one, vitamin D.
That's really interesting. Does it help you to spend more time in the sun? And what about sunscreen?
Well, yeah, I said you make it normally by sun exposure to your skin. The problem is your biochemistry is about 50,000 years old. It hasn't caught up evolutionarily speaking with our life. So your biochemistry thinks you're living in the tropics, not wearing clothes, picking fruit off the trees. Even as far north as Kansas, which we don't typically think of as north, the intensity of the sunlight there is much less than it would be if you were down in Baja. And I have seen lots and lots and lots of patients in the Nebraska and Kansas area who are out in the sunshine a lot. One of my favorite examples is a guy who was a roofer. Okay, he's in his little tank top and his cutoff shorts on people's roofs. He's got actinic keratosis, little pre-skin cancer lesions on his skin. His vitamin D level was in the toilet. He had virtually none. Mm-hmm. Part of that reflects his own personal biochemistry wasn't making it well, but part of it is, even though he was getting a lot of sun, where he was getting the sun along the Kansas-Nebraska border, the sunlight wasn't strong enough to do the job. And again, the more you cover up, the more you slather on the sunscreen, mm-hmm. the less vitamin D you're going to make.
Okay. And is it safer to wear your sunscreen, I assume, as we've been told, also anyway, which blocks it?
Well, whole nother topic, and okay. we can get off on that one, but and you know, I don't want the dermatologist picketing your house.
Okay.
But it's important to understand there's a difference between sun exposure and sun damage.
Okay.
And actually, the majority of the sunscreens sold out on the market, they're toxic. They have some chemicals in them that are probably doing more to cause skin cancer than the sun exposure itself. Mm-hmm. So using mineral-based sunscreens, like the ones that have zinc in it, are safer. But again, the key is moderation, and you build yourself up. But again, because everything is a balance, and you do have that issue with skin damage, whether it's cancer or not, okay? I mean, you can pick out the girls that we went to high school with that were out at Afton sunbathing all summer long, getting really dark based on how their skin looks today, mm-hmm. okay? So excessive sun causes damage to your skin. Vitamin D is dirt cheap. So rather than saying go hit the tanning bed or increase the amount of time you're spending on the beach at Lake Cheney, it's a lot more sensible to just pop a vitamin D capsule once a day. It costs pennies.
Okay. Where do they get it? Where do they come up with vitamin D to put it in our capsules?
A crafty little chemist make it in their lab.
Okay. And I would imagine that there's a big difference depending on the source. And so how do you know what to take if you can buy something at the big box store, or if you buy something from your chiropractor or from a direct sales company where there's all kinds of people praising the benefits of their...
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the FDA in general, I don't think is our friend. They're in league with big pharmacy to produce medications that cost a fortune. There, I said it. But they are correct when they say, well, nobody's regulating the supplement industry. That's true. Mm-hmm. So it is kind of a caveat emptor, and that applies not just to vitamin D, but everything else we're going to talk about in this segment. And so it's a case of you get what you pay for. And doesn't mean you have to buy the most expensive brand out there. But I'm always reluctant when people just run down to Safeway and pull anything off the shelf. I mean, for one thing, there's a chance it came from China. which carries a little weight when we say that these days.
Mhm.
But the question is the potency in it really any good or not?
Mhm.
And I tend to recommend using companies that primarily sell to healthcare providers, naturopaths, chiropractors, these sort of people, functional medicine doctors, who are then turning around and retailing it back to their patients. Because then if the capsule that's being marketed as 5,000 units turns out to only have 500 units and people aren't getting their levels up, that company's now going to hear from a whole bunch of pissed off healthcare practitioners. And so hopefully they're a little bit more stick to their guns and honest about what they're selling. Again, going to some of the places, there's a good compounding pharmacy in Wichita. They sell over-the-counter supplements as well. That's a place that you can count on as being highly reliable sources. But again, some of the big brands, just because they have a national label, maybe it's good, maybe it's not. My own PA, after we checked vitamin D levels on probably 400 or 500 patients, he finally decided to get on board and started taking vitamin D because his level was low, and we got his level up where it belonged. And one day, I didn't even know he was doing this. He rechecked his level, and it had dropped from about 75 to the 20s. And he came storming into the office, all pissed off. What happened? I haven't changed anything. Why is my level dropped in half? So we played detective and said, well, what's been going on? Well, he was originally getting his vitamin D at our office, where we were buying it from a company that I trust. And then he ran low, and he just happened to be at the grocery store. So he just grabbed a bottle off the shelf. So according to the labels, he was taking the same amount, but when we tested his blood level, his level had plummeted. And so obviously the potency of what he grabbed off the supermarket shelf was nowhere close to what he'd been getting from our office.
I think it just sounds fascinating to get your levels checked, know what you are looking for versus, the color chart range that comes on the printout, and then to recheck it. I think that's really interesting. So you can go to your medical doctor for that. Are there other people that test for that for you?
It depends on the state you're in. The laws vary. In some states, your chiropractor can order lab tests. In some states, they can't. There's a company called Life Extension that makes really good products. I'm not here pitching any one company, but Life Extension also has a service where they provide lab testing. And again, depending on the state you're in, because state laws control this sort of thing, a lot of people can actually go to Life Extension, by which I mean go to their website, and they can order their own blood test and get it done that way. But the easiest, again, is just call your primary care doc up and say, I want my vitamin D level checked. And when he or she says no, don't take no for an answer. Say, darn it, I want to know, and I'm not hanging the phone up until you agree to check it. Mm-hmm. There's zero risk to getting your blood test done. So there's no excuse not to.
And what other supplements? I've heard about zinc.
Sure. Let me skip over and come back, because number 2 on my list would be vitamin C.
Okay.
Again, vitamin C is one of these supplements that the recommended amount to take is based on a disease, scurvy. Okay, so the British Navy is no longer coming down with scurvy. Good for them. But the amount of vitamin C that's recommended is woefully low compared to the amount that we know optimizes your health. Linus Pauling won 2 Nobel Prizes. The only person in history to solo win 2 Nobel Prizes. And he spent the last portion of his career trying to get mainstream medicine to pay attention to the benefits of vitamin C. And we backed the boat up, and remember I said that unfortunately the FDA and the big pharmacy companies are hand in glove. And The pharmacy companies are in it to make money. I'm a capitalist. I'm all for making money, but don't confuse your best health with the best interests of the pharmaceutical industry. If they started curing people, they're going to run out of customers. They want you sick and taking their pills. And again, vitamin C, you don't need a prescription for. It's dirt cheap. And so there's not a lot of push to do medical studies to see how well vitamin C works, because there's no money in it. And if there's no money in it, that means there's no money to fund doing the studies. And remember, I said doing studies on people is difficult anyway. Mm-hmm. But Pauling went all over the world working with people, looking at the benefits of vitamin C. And he actually published 2 books, one on how vitamin C could prevent the common cold, and another on how vitamin C could prevent getting influenza. And what did I say about vitamin D? We know that that helps you not come down with the colds and the flu, which are both viruses. Mm-hmm. So if it will prevent you from getting those viruses, it's certainly reasonable to think that it would help keep you from coming down with the COVID-19, because that's a virus too. And the kicker is, again, most people take a woefully small amount. Pauling liked to tell a story about when he was on a TV show. And it was a woman's magazine that invited him and a big expert in mainstream infectious disease to come talk about whether vitamin C was helpful in keeping you from getting just the common cold. And the big expert said on camera, "I tried Dr. Pauling's approach and it didn't work." And after the cameras quit rolling, he turned to Pauling and said, "But of course, I didn't take the astronomical amounts you recommended." So the truth is that the mainstream expert who liked writing prescriptions for pricey drugs took a little tiny amount, didn't see any benefit, and said, "Well, there, it doesn't work." Well, if you had a urinary tract infection, we wouldn't give you one Bactrim pill and say, "Just take that, you'll be fine." You take it twice a day for 2 weeks. You have to take the right dose. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with vitamin C. It appears that all the benefits that you get from vitamin C, which includes fighting cancer, come at doses that are way higher than what people are getting out of their multivitamin. And by the way, do not write in and tell us you're getting your vitamin C by drinking orange juice. Remember, I said obesity is still factor number 1, and sugar is the biggest cause of obesity, and fruit juices are full of sugar. Mm-hmm. When somebody gets an overdose of insulin in the hospital and their blood sugar plummets, the nurse knows to run and get an orange juice and give them the orange juice because it jacks their blood sugar back up. And it does that to people who don't have dangerously low blood sugar. So again, vitamin C capsules are cheap. And yes, you can get lots of vitamin C from eating fruits and vegetables. But chugging down a quart of orange juice a day is going to put weight on around the middle, and you're still not going to get the amount of vitamin C that I would recommend. And again, back to what am I doing differently now than before the COVID came out? Mm-hmm. I used to take 3 grams of vitamin C a day. Dr. Pauling's recommendation at baseline for healthy people to stay healthy was 6 to 8 grams a day. So I've doubled the amount of vitamin C I take every day. And again, do I have proof that that's going to make me less likely to come down with the corona? Nope. There's not any proof out there one way or the other. But again, it was good enough for a guy with 2 Nobel Prizes, so it's good enough for me. And what's the risk of taking more vitamin C? I'm probably spending an extra 20 cents a day to take the extra pills. And that's the only risk to it. So vitamin C is number 2 on my list. Okay.
I'm looking at a vitamin that I have here, 200 milligrams of vitamin C. And it says D3 is in here, 5 mcg. I don't even know what that means. Oh, 2000 U.
IU, international units.
Okay. So,
So again, you've got a pill that, in my opinion, is completely worthless.
okay.
I'm taking 10,000 international units of vitamin D a day.
Okay.
So doing the math, that would be 50 of those to get the vitamin D level the same.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm taking 6,000 milligrams a day. So again,
Whoa.
the problem with multivitamins is to get the amount that you need in a multivitamin. It's going to be the size of a softball, if not bigger. The only way to make the multivitamin small enough to swallow is to put smaller amounts in. So while you can argue and say, well, a little bit is better than nothing, maybe yes, but also maybe no. We go back to the television program with Dr. Pauling and his adversary, who took a little bit and said, well, the damn stuff doesn't work. The answer being, you didn't take enough for it to do the job. And again, if somebody's taking 200 international units of vitamin D a day, go get your blood work done, because I guarantee you your level is probably not even going to be 30, let alone 85 or 90. It's just not enough.
How long would it take you to, once you start amping up the recommended amount of vitamin C and vitamin D, how long would it take you to really impact your levels?
The vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, and it'll come up over a week or two, and then you'll balance out to a steady state level. So again, I usually tell people start taking it, and then in a month, we check your blood level and see where we're at and see if we need to adjust. The vitamin C is absorbed much more rapidly. And again, people that hate vitamins, which again are people that write prescriptions for expensive drugs, will jump on vitamins, even multivitamins, and say, well, it's just expensive urine. You're just peeing that stuff right out. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's true. You do excrete these. But what I'm not doing is taking my 8 grams of vitamin C at one time. For one thing, your stomach's not going to tolerate that amount. And so you're going to get a stomach ache and probably diarrhea. But even if it doesn't upset your gut, what you're going to get if you take your 8 grams in the morning is a high level in the morning and a very low level in the evening. Mm. And what I want is to keep my level up all day long, because what if my exposure to COVID is tonight, not this morning? Mm-hmm. So I take it 4 times a day, starting with when I get up in the morning and finishing when I go to bed at night. So I divide the doses, which is the same thing you do with B vitamins. It's important to have adequate B vitamin in your system, and you clear it out of your system very rapidly, but you want high levels. And the only way you get high adequate levels of B complex is you have to take it 2, or better yet, 3 times a day, so you keep the level up consistently, as opposed to being on a roller coaster ride of it's better than good or optimal for a little bit, and then it's down in the bottom of the sink and back up again. So the multivitamin, again, maybe it's better than nothing, but again, it's not cheap either. It may not be expensive, but you're still paying for it. Mm-hmm. And what you're probably buying is an insufficient amount of everything there. Now, again, we talk about pill burden. Okay, we talk about compliance. In other words, the more complicated a regimen that I put a health and wellness patient on, mm-hmm. the less likely it is that they're going to follow that regimen. I take a handful of pills 4 times a day. Most people aren't willing to do that. And so again, if somebody says, I'm only going to take 1 thing a day, well, which thing do you pick? And maybe it is a multivitamin. Although right now, frankly, if you said I'm only going to take 1 thing a day, I'd say take your vitamin D. But again, we could sit here for an hour and go down the list of everything I take, which would probably terrify half the people watching and convince the other half that I'm a loony. But what we can do is narrow it down to what are the most important things. You know, we've played this game at anti-aging and wellness meetings.
Mhm.
where we ask all the doctors in the room, what are your top 5 supplements? Because every doctor in the room has a different list of what he takes, a different list of what he or she recommends their patient take. But when you narrow it down to where's the biggest bang for the buck, virtually everybody in the room has a very similar top 5. And guess what? Vitamin D is always at the top of that list, and vitamin C is always on that list.
Yeah.
And that was well before the corona epidemic.
Okay. So what else is on top of the list?
Okay, you jumped my gun here and came up with zinc before I had a chance to mention it. But zinc would be the next one on the list.
Okay.
Zinc is not a vitamin, it's a mineral, and its action is as a cofactor or a coenzyme. The function of the zinc is it helps other things in your body do the job it's supposed to do. And one of those primary functions is making your immune system work correctly. And again, it's a given that you're going to be exposed to the virus. It's just a question of when. So the better your immune system is when you get that exposure, the better the chance is you brush it off as opposed to ending up in the hospital. So again, taking zinc on a regular basis, we know improves your immunity. Do we have studies proving it prevents or treats coronavirus? Nope. Like I said, it's too early.
Mhm.
But if you look at the combination of drugs that a lot of doctors and hospitals are trying, it's the hydroxychloroquine mixed with the Z-Pak, which is an antibiotic. So it's not treating the virus. You're trying to prevent a secondary bacterial infection. And what's the third arm of that? Zinc. Okay, so the zinc helps with your lung function. The zinc helps with your immune function. The zinc helps you fight viruses in general. And again, pre-epidemic, I took zinc 3 times a week. I'm taking one every day now.
And so what kind of amount is appropriate?
I take 225 milligrams a day. And again, that is not that that's the exact right number. It just happens to be the amount that's in the pills I have.
Okay.
But most of them run in around the 200 to 250 milligram range. And again, nobody has an exact science that says, exactly this many milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So we're shooting in the ballpark, and that around 200 to 250, 225 is an acceptable dose for people.
So 200 to 225, and I've got one here that's 2.2. So
yeah,
wow.
yeah.
And
So again, they're putting a little something of everything in so they can put on the label, we have everything. What they fail to mention is we don't have enough of anything.
yeah, so I have a cabinet full of supplements and things because I'm in a lot of business networking groups and people are selling things and I end up buying it. And so I went through my entire cabinet looking for zinc. And one of the highest things I found was a protein powder that has 6 milligrams. So woefully underprepared to take a lot of zinc at home with what I already had.
Yeah. Now, again, I'm going to interject here. Don't confuse if a little is good, a lot has to be better.
Okay.
Vitamin D, it's extremely, extremely hard to overdose on. Your family practitioner who probably has no experience with vitamins, and that's not slamming your doctor, okay? I went to medical school too, and we got no information on nutrition. We got no information on supplements beyond in biochemistry saying, here's the list and this is what their structure looks like. Okay, so it's not willful negligence or mean-spiritedness, it's a lack of being educated in this. Mm. And everybody's taught in medical school that the fat-soluble vitamins can be absorbed in your body and you don't excrete them rapidly, and so you'll rapidly become toxic on them. Well, not to get off track, but remember I mentioned autoimmune diseases like MS are related to low vitamin D levels. I know a lot of neurologists who are treating their MS patients with very, very high levels of vitamin D, and they're not seeing any problems. Okay, so it's not that you can't overdose, but it's hard to. You got to really push it. Vitamin C, I'm going to say you virtually cannot. What you end up with is a matter of gut tolerance. If you take enough, eventually you'll get the runs. And so when you start having loose stools, you've hit the wall, back it down one. But we also have seen that when people become sick, they're ascorbate, their vitamin C level in their body goes down because your body's using it. And the amount of vitamin C you're able to take when you're sick without having GI upset is much higher than when you're not sick. Matter of fact, Pauline's protocol for just preventing the cold and flu was you took 6 to 8 grams a day, but the moment you got symptoms, you took an additional 1 gram every hour until the symptoms went away. So vitamin C, pretty safe. If you start getting the runs, take 1 less pill. Zinc is a mineral you can overdose on, okay? So what I don't want people doing is saying, oh, well, zinc was on the list, so I'm going to buy a big bottle and take a whole handful. You know, like I said, previously I was taking it 3 times a day because I thought that was getting me an adequate amount for just general health. And again, right now, when we're all concerned about this virus, I pushed it up a little bit to once a day. But I don't want people going out and saying, well, he's taking 200 milligrams, so I'm going to take 1,000. You can't overdo it. And one of the things, again, we can talk biochemistry till people's eyes glaze over, but copper is another essential mineral in your body. And to really be healthy, you need a balance between your zinc level and your copper level. And so you get way too much zinc and you basically are giving your body a copper deficiency. So you don't want to go overboard.
Wow. I think you could teach a class on this to the lay public because there's so much to it.
Yeah. It's what we're trying to do now, as a matter of fact. Okay. So next one on the list is vitamin A. And again, vitamin A is involved in a lot of functions, and most people are aware of vitamin A being good for your eyes. Okay, vitamin A and the carotenoids, the substances from carrots, are the #1 way to prevent the #1 cause of treatable blindness in the world. There's some really good charitable places that are going around giving vitamin A drops to children in India so they don't go blind. But vitamin A is also an immune system modulator. And part of the way it works is, remember I said when you get sick, your vitamin C level goes down in your body. Vitamin A is used by your body to recreate that vitamin C so that it gets recycled to help keep your vitamin C level up. So it's kind of the helper vitamin to the vitamin C. It has a lot of functions on its own. But again, taking 1 vitamin A capsule a day isn't a bad idea. But again, I don't want you taking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of units of vitamin A, but getting a little bit of it on a regular basis, like daily, is a good idea, okay? And the next one on my list is something called Epicor. And again, I'm trying hard not to pitch companies or products, but Epicor, that's EPICOR, is actually a derivative from brewer's yeast. And it has an interesting little story to go with it. And the bottom line is, this again is something that's been shown to sort of prop up your immune system and make you less likely to get sick. How do we know this? Well, there was a farmer in the Midwest, not in Kansas, but he had his magic formula that when his livestock would start to get ill, he gave them this stuff and they did great. And it worked well enough that it got out to everybody else with cows and pigs and sheep and whatever. And anytime any of their stock would get sick, they'd come to him and want his magic formula. And this caught on so well that he actually started up a company that began producing this as a supplement, again, for livestock. And the main use for it was when you pack up your cows to take them off to the slaughterhouse in Kansas City and you bundle them into these trucks, that's very stressful.
Mhm.
And it really negatively impacts the health of the cattle, and you can lose some along the way. They literally will die or they get badly ill, makes the meat terrible. And so they were giving this to animals before they transported them. Well, the company grew because it was working and catching on. And so eventually the company decides they're going to self-insure. And they bring in a bean counter, an actuary, to look at the numbers to figure out how much it's going to cost to have their own health insurance for the workers. And by this point, they had two buildings. One was the office building where the workers were taking orders and collecting the checks. And the other was the production building where they were actually making this stuff and putting it into capsules and sticking it in the sacks. And what they discovered is the people in the office building looked like every other comparable sized office building in that region in terms of how many sick days, how many people out with the flu, blah, blah, blah. When they looked at the people in the production building, no one got sick. No one was ever taking a sick day. And it's like, well, what the heck is this about?
Mhm.
And they went into the production building, and one thing they noticed is there was a lot of dust in the air that was from making these tablets.
Mhm.
So all of these workers were constantly inhaling and getting it in their mouth and swallowing, getting dosed with this stuff. And they actually got some of them to finally admit that anytime anybody in the family started to get sick, they'd light finger some of the product and take it home and give it to the family to keep the family from getting sick.
Uh-huh.
So again, there's no study that anybody has done saying if you're taking Epicor, you're less likely to get COVID than if you're not.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of evidence that people that take that take Epicor are much less likely to end up losing days at work from being sick with the flu or sick with a cold or sick with the GI bug. The people that really love taking it are school teachers. You think about that, we're all worried about being exposed to bugs. The poor school teachers are going into those classrooms with a bunch of snotty-nosed kids every day. They get exposed to God knows what. I know a lot of school teachers that take their Epicor one capsule every day to just try to stay ahead of the game so they're not catching every bug that their kids bring in one after another all season long.
Now, are there different sources to buy the Epicor, or is that a particular company that you go
There's a couple of different companies that now sell it. It used to be just one. To the best of my knowledge, it's all the same stuff from the same source. It's just a matter of who's packaging it and putting their bottle to try to get the wholesale to retail markup. Again, I haven't done independent testing on that, so I can't swear it to you. But as far as I know, it's only coming from one place, and it just depends on what label's been slapped on the bottle.
Okay. So when you are taking your vitamins and minerals 4 times a day, are you usually taking that with a little bit of food or something? Do you need to do that to kind of protect you from, feeling nauseous from taking it?
Everybody's different. And again, I take a lot more than the average person will, and I've kind of worked my way up to it. Intermittent fasting is one of the best things to do in terms of insulin resistance and keeping your weight optimized. And so I personally try to only eat between about 10 or 10:30 in the morning and 5 or 6 in the evening, which means I'm not eating when I take my morning pills.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time I'm fine with that. Occasionally, again, I take a big handful of things and I wash it down with a couple of cups of coffee. And sometimes I get that little uneasy feeling. And so I'll have a teaspoon of peanut butter, which since it's mostly fat, don't buy main brand peanut butter full of sugar. Peanut butter is peanuts. Peanuts. So again, with real peanut butter, it's just fat calories. It doesn't really throw my fasting off. But again, I don't have to do that all the time. My wife, who takes almost as much as I do, and I say almost because I can't force the rest of it down her throat, pill compliance. She eats a little yogurt with nuts in it every morning, because if she takes all of her vitamins on an empty stomach, it doesn't sit well with her. Mm-hmm. But again, it's based on individuals.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that lesson. So did that cover what you wanted to share on supplements? Is there anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, I think those are the big hitters. Like I said, we can talk about supplements and general health all day, but for people that are narrowing in, I think the only other thing I would mention is fish oil, because the omega-3 fatty acids in fish oil, when I said that when you talk to a room full of anti-aging doctors, what's their top 5? Vitamin D is typically number 1. Fish oil is number 2. And it's a very important way to treat inflammation in your body. And again, part of our problem as a country at baseline, and even worse than now that COVID is out there, is the majority of people are chronically inflamed from this awful standard American diet that abbreviates SAD. And it's full of vegetable oils, which are horribly toxic. They're omega-6 fatty acids. Now, you need a little of it. But the problem is what controls the inflammation in your body is a balance between the amount of omega-3, which is in fish oil, versus the amount of omega-6, which is in vegetable oils. And what your body wants is high omega-3 and low omega-6, not 0, but low. Okay. What the standard American diet is virtually no omega-3s and astronomically high omega-6s, which impairs your immune system. And a lot of the researchers looking at COVID right now are thinking that what's killing people is this cytokine storm, where you get an over-the-top immune reaction that's so vigorously trying to fight the virus that it ends up destroying your own body. And one of the reasons that I think obesity is the number one factor we're seeing in people coming sick with this is obesity is a pro-inflammatory state. Your belly fat is making hormones that cause inflammation. So the fish oil is something that lowers your inflammatory state. And so again, it's good for you anyway. It's good for your heart. It's good for your brain. It helps with your arthritis. All of my back patients in my neurosurgery practice, I put on fish oil to help with their arthritic back pain. But anything that you do to lower your baseline inflammation is potentially going to hedge your bet as to whether you have one of these terrible reactions once you are exposed to the virus.
I think inflammation would be a good topic just all by itself. And on fish oil, I've heard you talk before about when people have a bad reaction when they say, I don't like to take fish oil because I burp it and it's just gross. So could you speak to that, why the quality is important?
Yeah, the fish oil is probably the best example of it pays to get something that's good quality, because fish oil can go rancid. It can go bad. And so when somebody tells you, oh, I tried that stuff, but man, I was having these foul burps and I just felt awful. Well, if you ate a bad piece of fish, how are you going to feel? Mm-hmm. And if, again, your fish oil came from China and it wasn't well processed, had a lot of impurities in it, then it got stuck in a freight car, put on a ship that went through the Panama Canal, and basically baked it for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. What kind of quality of oil is that going to be? Yeah, so I've lectured people, you have to get a good quality fish oil, because again, when it goes rancid, it's not just that it doesn't set well with you, it joins the other team and it causes inflammation, it causes problems. And again, my wife has been my guinea pig and white rabbit ever since I got into this line of work. Mm-hmm. We were taking one of the best brands out there, which is Nordic Naturals. Again, I said I try not to pitch brands, but Nordic Naturals is very, very high quality fish oil. And we were making our annual trip down to Aspen to ski. And as I'm packing, I realized, well, rats were almost out. But I thought, well, we're stopping in Estes Park and we'll just run in and grab some while we're in Estes. Mm-hmm. So we get into Estes that evening and I go into the pharmacy, or actually I went to the vitamin shop, but it's winter and that's not tourist season in Estes Park, and the vitamin shop is closed for the season. So I go to the pharmacy and I'm walking up and down the aisles and I don't see any brand that I recognize. And it's getting later by the minute. So I run over to Safeway and same thing. I don't see anything I recognize. And so what did I do? I did what I tell everybody don't do. I grabbed something off the shelf and just bought it, and I brought it home and I gave it to the wife, and she turned green. Oh, no. And absolutely said, I'm not taking that crap. And I poo-pooed her and said, you're just being spoiled. And the next morning I gave it to her again, and I thought she was going to hurl, and into the trash it went, and online to Amazon, and we had the Nordic Naturals sent to our place in Aspen. So again, from personal experience, buy bad oil, get bad results. So you want something that's well purified and has been handled carefully.
Well, very good. Well, thank you for your time and explaining all of that today. We just really appreciate it. And I hope this is helpful to someone. And if you'd like more information, be sure to send us a message or reach out and we'll try to get your question answered. And if you're in Wichita, Kansas, you might get a chance to meet Dr. Watt. We were just getting ready to start Empowering Senior Labs, the lab series, where we would have small group workshops. And with the virus out there, I don't know if we'll be gathering like that this year, but hopefully one of these days soon, Dr. Watt will have you for something like that. And we'll certainly be watching for the different opportunities to hear from you.
Hopefully sooner rather than later. And one last quick pitch, if people just can't get enough of looking at my face, I do have a YouTube channel, Tim Watt MD, and I cover most of these topics in little brief videos. So you can go back and watch to your heart's content.
Perfect. Is that where you post most of your things, is on your YouTube channel? That's a good place to see everything.
Yes.
All right. Tim Watt, MD. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And to our viewers, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
My pleasure. Stay healthy, everybody.
Thank you.